The screen above the gate podium flickered once. Then it changed. Every person in that terminal looked up at the same moment. Not because anyone told them to. Because something in the air shifted. The way air shifts before lightning. The gate agent looked at the screen. Then looked at the man in the gray hoodie standing in front of her. The man she had spent 35 minutes trying to move out of the way. His name was on the screen now, his title, his equity stake. 34%. She looked at her badge. The green light that had been on every morning for 6 years. Off. Somewhere in the seating area, a phone was still recording. The viewer count was climbing faster than anyone could track. And the man in the gray hoodie hadn't raised his voice once. Not once, he didn't need to. He just stood there, calm, unhurried. Like he had known exactly how this morning was going to end before it started. And the woman behind the podium was only now beginning to understand why. Brooklyn. January, 1995. The cold came off the East River that morning like it had somewhere to be. Raymond Ellison wore his only good suit, navy blue, bought second-hand from a shop on Flatbush Avenue, pressed twice the night before, once because it needed it, and once because he needed to feel like he had done everything right. He was 25 years old. He had a degree in electrical engineering from City College. He had a folder with his resume inside, 3 copies, because his mother told him always bring 3. He had taken the A train to Howard Beach, and then the air train to Terminal 4 at JFK, and he had practiced what he was going to say the whole ride out. The receptionist at the facilities desk did not look up when he walked in. He stood there, said good morning, slid his resume across the counter. She typed something, clicked something, then said, without once looking at his face, that the position had already been filled and he should check back in a few months. Raymond picked up his resume, folded it, put it back in the folder. He walked outside, stood on the curb, looked at the terminal building for a long time. Glass and steel, planes moving in the gray distance, people going places. Then he turned around and went home. He never talked about that morning, not once in 26 years. But sometimes when something happened that reminded him of it, he would go quiet in a way that filled the whole room. His son would learn to read that silence before he learned to read anything else. 26 years later, Damon Ellison would walk back through those same doors. This time, he owned part of what was behind them. The taxi smelled like pine air freshener and old coffee. Damon sat in the back seat with his phone face down on his knee. Outside, the expressway was moving. Gray morning. The kind of light that doesn't commit to anything. He was 26 years old. Gray hoodie, no logo, clean white sneakers, not new. One canvas bag over one shoulder. He looked like someone who had somewhere to be and no interest in explaining it. He called Karen Mills at 7:14 a.m. Karen picked up on the first ring. Because Karen always picked up on the first ring. Terminal 4, she said, before he said anything. Gate 34, you're confirmed. How many complaints from this gate specifically? 11, out of 17 total. Same time window, 14 months, all of them. Damon looked out the window. A delivery truck changed lanes without signaling. The taxi driver said something under his breath. The flag I asked you to pull, Damon said. Complaint number 9, walk me through it. He heard Karen's keyboard, then a pause that lasted just a beat too long. Passenger held at gate 34, valid ticket, told there was a booking discrepancy. Held for 40 minutes, bumped to a later departure. Filed a complaint 2 days after, another pause, marked resolved in 48 hours. No documentation of any investigation, no follow-up contact made with the passenger. Who was the gate agent on record? Patricia Walsh. Damon didn't say anything. Damon, I'm here. You want me to flag your account before you go in? Executive override would, no. He said it the same way he always said it, flat, decided, standard passenger. Nothing else. Karen knew better than to push. She had worked with Damon long enough to understand that when he sounded the most calm, he was the most serious. I'll have the activation code ready when you need it. Keep the file on complaint 9 open on your end. I may need it fast. He ended the call, put the phone face down again. Watched the airport terminal come into view through the windshield. He had been to 4 terminals in 3 weeks. 3 of them were clean, routine, professional, nothing worth noting. This one had 11 complaints in 14 months, all from gate 34. He wasn't angry. He had decided a long time ago that anger was not the most useful thing he could bring into a situation like this. What he brought instead was patience, and a very good memory. And today, for the first time, he brought his family. Uncle Clarence's car was a 2009 Lincoln Town Car, dark green, kept up like it was brand new. He had driven a taxi for 30 years, and it showed in the way he moved through traffic, certain, unhurried, never crowding anyone. Damon's parents were in the back seat. Raymond, 54, broad in the shoulders, gray at the temples, wearing a polo shirt that Lorraine had laid out for him the night before. Lorraine, 51, in a light linen blouse, her reading glasses on top of her head, a book in her lap that she had not opened since they left the house. Clarence pulled up to the departures level and put the car in park. He was 68 years old, big hands, the kind of face that had seen a lot and decided most of it wasn't worth rushing over. He wore a watch on his left wrist that was older than anyone in the car, a Bulova, gold-toned, with a small crack in the crystal that nobody had ever fixed because nobody wanted to touch it. Damon noticed the watch. He always noticed it. "You eat?" Clarence said, looking at Raymond in the rear view. "Fish fry from Fulton Street," Lorraine said. "Same as always." Clarence nodded like that was the correct answer. Turned the engine off even though he was just dropping them. Some people sit in a running car. Clarence was not some people. "Flight's at 9:15, he said. 9:20, Damon said. "You got time." They sat for a moment. A porter rolled a luggage cart past. A family with too many bags tried to figure out where to go. The automatic doors opened and closed, opened and closed. Then Clarence said, "You know, I flew out of this airport last October." Nobody asked him to continue, they didn't need to. When Clarence started something, you let him finish. "Flying down to Atlanta." Harold Simmons passed. "You remember Harold used to play cards with your grandfather on Sundays. Good man." He looked out the windshield. "Anyway, I get to gate 34, my ticket's fine. Everything's fine. Agent up front starts telling me there's some kind of problem with my booking. Can't tell me what exactly. Just a problem." Raymond's jaw tightened. Barely visible, but Damon saw it. "They had me standing off to the side for 40 minutes, Clarence said. "Everybody else going through just fine. Then they tell me I have to take the next flight. 4 hours later." He shook his head slowly. "I missed the beginning of the service. Sat in that Atlanta airport for 4 hours thinking about Harold and thinking about a lot of other things." Lorraine reached over and put her hand on Clarence's arm. "I filed a complaint when I got home," Clarence said. "Figured it was the right thing to do. Your grandmother always said say it even when nobody's listening. Somebody might be." He half smiled. Never heard back. Damon looked at the watch on his uncle's wrist. "Uncle Clarence," he said. "That watch." Clarence looked down at it, turned his wrist slightly. "Your grandfather's. Elijah wore it the day he came out to this airport in 1961 looking for work. Got told the same thing Raymond got told 30 years later. A small sound that was almost a laugh. Not quite. Different words. Same message. 3 generations. Same airport. Same message." Damon filed that away somewhere he didn't have a name for yet. "All right," Clarence said, and the word landed like a door closing softly. "Time to go." He pulled the keys from the ignition and got out to help with the bags. Damon got out last, stood on the curb for a second, looking up at the terminal building, glass and steel. Then he picked up his bag and walked inside. JFK Terminal 4 at 7:50 in the morning had its own specific rhythm, not frantic, just full. Coffee cups and carry-ons and the overhead announcements cycling through in that flat, airport voice that belonged to no one and everywhere at once. They checked in at the kiosks without issue. 4 boarding passes. Flight AS447 Miami on time. Damon tucked his in the front pocket of his hoodie. Standard, unremarkable, exactly what he wanted. Security moved fast. Raymond had TSA pre-check. Lorraine moved through with the ease of someone who had spent 22 years managing a room full of people and understood that the fastest way through a line was to be completely ready before you got there. Damon pulled his laptop out, put it in the bin, moved through without a word. On the other side, Raymond was waiting. He looked at his son and said nothing, just waited. They got coffee from a cart near the B gates. Lorraine added too much sugar to hers and said nothing about it. Raymond drank his black. Damon didn't get coffee. He was already paying attention to too many things. They found gate 34 at 9A. It looked like any other gate. Rows of seats half full. The departure board showed AS447 to Miami on time, boarding at 8:50. The Apex Sky logo rotated slowly on the digital display, silver wing, clean lines. Damon had seen that logo on reports and spreadsheets and board presentation slides for 3 years. It never stopped feeling strange to see it in the world. Behind the gate podium, a woman was working. Patricia Walsh, 44 years old, badge reading senior gate agent, hair pulled back, not a strand out of place. Her eyes moved from her tablet to the boarding lane with the kind of mechanical efficiency that meant she wasn't seeing people anymore. Just tasks to process and problems to sort. She did not look up when the Ellison family approached. No greeting, no acknowledgement, just her hand extended, waiting for boarding passes. Raymond stepped up first, handed his over. She scanned it without a word, scanned Lorraine's, handed them back. Then Damon stepped forward. Patricia looked at his boarding pass, then she looked at him. The look lasted maybe 4 seconds. It traveled from his face to his hoodie to his sneakers to the canvas bag over his shoulder, then back up to his face, then back down to her tablet. Something shifted in her expression, not dramatic, not obvious. Just a small tightening around the eyes. The kind that happens when someone has made a decision they're not going to announce out loud. "Sir, I'm going to need to verify your booking manually." Damon kept his voice level. "Is there a flag in the system?" "That's not something I'm required to discuss with passengers. I'm asking because we booked directly through the Apex Sky website, all 4 tickets, 2 weeks ago. I have the confirmation number if you need it." Patricia did not look up. "If you could just step to the side while I check." "What specifically are you checking?" Lorraine asked. Her voice was even, a teacher's voice, the kind that had managed rooms full of people for 2 decades and understood the difference between volume and weight. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to ask you to let me do my job." "That's fine. I'm asking what your job is looking for right now." Patricia tapped her screen. Once, twice. Nothing changed on it because there was nothing to change. Damon could see the screen from where he was standing. It was blank, no flag, no error, no discrepancy of any kind. Lorraine saw it too. She had the same view. Raymond said nothing. He stood exactly where he was standing, both hands in the pockets of his khaki pants, his eyes on a fixed point just above Patricia's head. That was how Raymond Ellison stood when he was exercising a kind of discipline that cost him more than anyone watching would ever know. Patricia tilted the screen away. "Your family's going to need to wait over here," she said, and gestured toward the side of the podium, away from the boarding lane. Not confrontational, just directive. The way you direct something that is in the way. Raymond looked at his son. Damon gave the smallest nod. They stepped to the side. The boarding lane continued moving without them. A woman with a stroller, a man in a business suit, 2 college-age kids with backpacks, all of them flowing through as if the gate were a river, and the Ellison family had simply been set aside like something caught on a rock. 3 rows back from the gate podium, in seat G7, Evelyn Brooks was doing 3 things at once. She was finishing the caption for a post about airline lounges that was already 3 days late. She was drinking coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago and not minding. And she was watching. Evelyn was 29 years old. She ran a travel writing account that had more followers than she expected and fewer sponsors than she wanted. She was good at noticing things. It was the job. You had to be able to look at a place and find the story inside it that wasn't on the brochure. She noticed the Ellison family when they arrived at the gate. She noticed the way Patricia Walsh looked at Damon Ellison. She noticed the way the boarding lane kept moving while the family stood to the side. She noticed Lorraine Ellison's jaw, the deliberate stillness of Raymond's hands. She had seen this before, not once, not twice. She opened her camera, kept it low, angled toward the gate area without pointing at anyone's face directly. She'd done this enough times to know you don't lead with the faces, you lead with the scene. She tapped record. She wrote the caption in about 30 seconds. "Something is happening at JFK Gate 34. Watch this." She did not post it yet. She waited, because the story wasn't done. At 8:24 a.m., Derek Cole appeared from the direction of the jet bridge. He was 38 years old, led cabin crew. His badge said so. He filled out his uniform the way certain men fill out a role, like he had built himself around it. Like the uniform and the man had become the same thing over time. He had been passed over for a promotion twice in 4 years. The second time, HR told him the decision was about seniority and budget, not performance. And he had nodded and said he understood and gone home and punched a hole in the drywall of his hallway, which he then patched himself and painted over, and nobody ever knew. He came to the podium at Patricia's signal. That signal was almost nothing, a look, a slight tilt of the chin. But he read it the way people who have worked the same space together read things, the language of a room they both knew. He glanced at the Ellison family. Not long, 3 seconds at most. Then he turned back to Patricia and said something. His voice was low enough that it didn't carry clearly, but Damon was standing close enough and had been watching closely enough to read the shape of what Derek Cole's mouth said. 2 words. Bump them. Damon did not react visibly. He shifted his canvas bag from one shoulder to the other, that was all. Derek came around the side of the podium, stopped in front of Damon with his hands behind his back. The posture of someone delivering information they've already decided is not up for debate. Sir, we're going to need to do a secondary check on your carry-on before you board. Damon looked at him. My bag cleared TSA 20 minutes ago. We have our own screening protocols. What protocol specifically? Derek blinked. Just once. Standard secondary. Applied to which passengers? No answer. Because I've been standing here watching the boarding lane for the last 15 minutes. Damon said. And I didn't see this protocol applied to anyone else who went through. Derek said. If you could just open the bag. Damon unzipped it and set it on the empty seat beside him. No hesitation. No resistance, just opened it and stepped back. Inside, a laptop in a sleeve, a charging cable, folded, a book, Aviation Industry Reform, a shareholder's perspective, the spine unbroken, the pages still crisp, a small toiletry case, a folded phone charger. Derek looked at the book, picked it up, turned it over. Read the back cover without expression. Set it down. Looked at the rest of the bag's contents the way you look when you're hoping to find something and running out of places to look. Carla Sutton was standing 6 feet behind Derek. She was 33 years old, the other gate agent on duty. Brown hair, small silver earrings, the look of someone who had started her shift, hoping it would be ordinary. She watched Damon open his bag, watched Derek go through it, watched Damon stand there with his hands at his sides, not talking, not fidgeting, just waiting. She looked down at her own shoes. Derek zipped the bag back up. We'll need a few more minutes to verify the booking. How many minutes? Raymond said. Derek turned to look at Raymond like he had forgotten Raymond was there. As many as it takes, sir. Raymond said nothing else. He just looked at Derek the way certain men look at things they have decided to remember. Lorraine watched Patricia Walsh behind the podium. Patricia had her eyes on her tablet. Her thumb had moved once, quickly, changing the screen just after Lorraine had seen that it was blank. Lorraine had been teaching high school English for 22 years. She knew when someone was performing a task versus when someone was avoiding a question. I'd like to see what's on that screen, Lorraine said. Ma'am, I saw it before you changed it. It was empty, nothing flagged, nothing irregular. What are you looking at now? Patricia's voice cooled by a degree. I'm going to need you to lower your voice. I haven't raised it, Lorraine said, and she hadn't. Her voice was exactly the same volume it had been the whole time, which was the volume of someone who knew that the words themselves were enough and didn't need the volume to do the work. I'm asking a direct question about a screen that was empty before you moved your thumb. What changed? No answer. And then Derek Cole did the thing that changed the morning from a difficult moment into something else entirely. He walked to the podium. He pressed the intercom button. His voice went through every speaker in Gate 34, and through the speakers in the corridor outside, and into the gate areas on either side, and into the coffee shop 40 feet away, where a woman looked up from her cup, and into the seating area where Evelyn Brooks lifted her camera angle by 3 inches. Attention all passengers at Gate 34. We are currently experiencing a security verification delay with several passengers. Please bear with us as we resolve this. Boarding will resume shortly. He did not name names. He didn't need to. There was exactly one group of people standing off to the side of the boarding lane. Every person in that gate area understood exactly who had just been announced as a security delay. A woman near the window leaned over to the man beside her. 2 teenagers looked up from their phones. A businessman who had been buried in his laptop stopped typing. Evelyn Brooks pressed record again, this time without hesitation. She posted the clip. Caption: Something is happening at JFK Gate 34. Watch this. 47 people saw it in the first minute. Then more. Lorraine Ellison watched the gate area turn its attention toward her family. She saw a woman cover her mouth. She saw an older gentleman 2 rows back set down his newspaper. She felt the specific weight of being pointed at in public, not accused of anything specific, not charged with anything real, just indicated, gestured toward, made into the problem. She had felt that weight before, many times, In many rooms, she had never gotten used to it. She didn't think she was supposed to. When she spoke, her voice did not waver. It did not rise. It was the same voice she used when a classroom needed to hear that something mattered, and the mattering did not require anyone to shout. "My family has done nothing wrong," she said, clearly. "Not for Derek, not for Patricia, for the room. We have valid tickets for this flight. We have been standing here for 23 minutes while every other passenger on this flight was boarded without question." She paused. "1 second. You just told this entire terminal that we are a security concern. Over a loudspeaker, in front of all of these people." Another pause. "For something that does not exist on your screen, which was empty." "Which I saw." Derek said. "Matt, I'm going to need you to." "I know what you need," Lorraine said. "I'm telling you what I know." The gate area was quiet in the way that a room gets quiet when something real has been said in it. 40 feet away, Evelyn Brooks watched the viewer count on her phone. It was climbing in the way weather climbs, not predictably, just definitely. Thomas Garfield had been sitting in seat H3 for the better part of an hour. 55 years old. Gray suit, good shoes, a Toomey roller bag parked neatly to his left. He had a Financial Times open on his iPad, and a coffee going cold in his right hand, and he had been half reading the same article about infrastructure investment for the last 20 minutes. He had looked up when the Ellison family first arrived at the gate. He had watched the whole thing unfold in the way people watch things unfold when they are telling themselves it's not their business. Patricia Walsh asking them to step aside. Derek Cole going through the young man's bag. Lorraine Ellison's voice, steady and precise. He had told himself several things in the last 20 minutes, that he didn't know the full story, that there was probably a procedure he wasn't aware of, that airport security was complicated, and he wasn't qualified to weigh in, that someone else would say something, that it would work itself out. He had told himself these things with decreasing conviction. He set down his iPad after Lorraine spoke. He looked at the Financial Times article. He had read the same paragraph 4 times without retaining a single word. He picked up his cold coffee, took a sip, set it down. Then Paul Okafor walked in. Paul Okafor was 44 years old and had been the station manager for Terminal 4 for 6 years. He moved the way people move when they have learned to read a room before they fully enter it, observing, measuring, filing. He had received a text from a junior staff member. Possible situation at gate 34. Crew involved. Passengers filming. He saw Evelyn Brooks first. He recognized the way she was holding her phone. He had seen that position before, and it never preceded anything good. He saw Patricia Walsh behind the podium with the controlled expression of someone managing a mistake. Derek Cole in the aisle. Lorraine Ellison with her hands folded and her chin up. Raymond Ellison with both hands in his pockets and his eyes on a fixed point. And Damon Ellison, standing slightly apart from his parents, canvas bag over one shoulder, watching everything with a stillness that Paul had not seen in a long time. Paul walked directly to the podium. He did not stop to talk to Derek. He did not ask Patricia what was happening. He took his own scanner, the station manager's override unit, and he fed each boarding pass through it himself. 1. Green light. 2. Green light. 3. Green light. 4. Green light. He stood there for a moment looking at the display. "There is no issue with these tickets," he said. Not loudly, not pointed, just as a fact that needed to be in the air. "None." Derek said, "With respect, Paul, the issue isn't about the scan. We've observed behavioral indicators." "What indicators?" It was not a question. Paul's voice stayed level. "What specific indicators?" Derek opened his mouth, closed it. Uncooperative demeanor during secondary screening. He opened his bag immediately when asked. Carla Sutton said. Everyone looked at her. Carla was looking at the floor. Then she wasn't. She looked up and repeated herself, quieter, but without taking it back. He opened his bag right away. There was no resistance. Derek looked at Carla the way a person looks at something that has gone wrong without warning. Paul wrote something in his notepad. Derek. Patricia. Step back from the podium. Derek did not step back. I have crew discretion to... I am not asking about crew discretion right now, Paul said. I am asking you to step back from the podium. A beat. Derek stepped back, and in the silence that followed, Damon Ellison reached into the front pocket of his hoodie and took out his phone. He dialed a number. One ring. Karen, it's Damon. I'm at gate 34, Terminal 4. You know what I need. A pause. Not yet, give me 60 seconds. He ended the call. Put the phone back in his pocket, stood with his hands at his sides. Looked at nothing in particular. 60 seconds. The gate area was very quiet. Evelyn Brooks counted the viewer count on her screen, 4,200, and climbing by the second. Thomas Garfield stood up from seat H3. He walked forward and stopped a respectful distance from the podium. He looked at Derek Cole. "I've been sitting over there for 35 minutes, he said. His voice was not loud. It was the voice of a man who was saying something he knew needed to be said, and was not especially comfortable saying it. "I watched every document check. I watched you go through this man's bag. I watched his family stand to the side while everyone else in this line boarded without a single question." A pause. "I should have come over sooner. That's on me. But I'm here now," Derek said. "Sir, this doesn't concern. I'm on this flight," Thomas said. "It concerns me." Damon's phone buzzed in his pocket. He took it out. "Read the screen. One line from Karen, ready when you say." He looked up, looked at Patricia Walsh, looked at Derek Cole, looked at his father Raymond, both hands still in his pockets, watching him now instead of the fixed point above the podium. Then he typed back, "Now." The main terminal screen at Gate 34, the large display above the podium that showed departure information and gate updates flickered once. Then it changed. The blue background of Apex Sky's interface, the same silver logo, the same clean font. But the information on the screen was different now. Executive passenger alert. Damon R. Ellison, board member, major shareholder. Equity stake 34%. Apex Sky Airlines Group. Clearance level, executive override. Any incident involving this passenger requires an immediate escalation to the office of the Chief Executive Officer. All related documentation must be preserved. Patricia Walsh looked at the screen. The color left her face. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just steadily, like water finding a way out of something. Derek read it. Read it again. His jaw shifted to one side and held there. Carla Sutton, from her position farther back, saw enough of the screen to understand what it said. She took one slow step backward. Paul Okafor read it carefully, set down his pen, looked at Damon with an expression that was several things at once: recognition, professional alarm, and the specific weight of a man who now understood the full dimensions of what he had walked into. Thomas Garfield looked at the screen, then at Damon, then at Raymond. Evelyn Brooks did not look at the screen. She was already watching the faces. Viewer count 38,411, and climbing. The gate area was completely, wholly, unreservedly silent. Raymond Ellison looked at his son. 26 years earlier, he had stood outside this terminal in a navy suit from a second-hand shop, and been told a position had already been filled by a woman who never once looked at his face. He had never talked about that morning. Not to Lorraine, not to Damon, not to anyone. He looked at his son, now 26 years old, standing in a gray hoodie in front of a gate area full of strangers. The name of the thing he had built glowing on the screen, behind the woman who had just spent 35 minutes trying to move him out of the way. Raymond Ellison put both hands in his pockets. And for the first time in a very long time, the thing he was holding in did not feel like silence. It felt like something else. It felt like proof. The screen stayed lit. Nobody moved. That was the thing about a moment like this one. The world kept going. The overhead announcements cycled through in that flat airport voice that belonged to no one and everywhere at once. A plane taxied somewhere outside the windows. A coffee cup fell off an armrest 2 rows back and hit the floor, and nobody picked it up. But nobody at Gate 34 moved. Patricia Walsh stood behind the podium with her badge on her chest, and the screen glowing blue behind her, and something happening to her face that she could not stop. Derek Cole stood in the aisle with his arms at his sides, and his jaw shifted left. Carla Sutton had taken one slow step backward and stopped, like she was not sure what direction was safe anymore. Damon stood in the middle of all of it, canvas bag on the floor now, hands loose, face completely, stubbornly, unreasonably calm, like he had known how this ended before it started, which he had. Derek broke first. Of course Derek broke first. This could be fabricated. His voice had lost something since the intercom. Thinner now, harder at the edges. Anyone can push a notification to a terminal screen. We'd need to verify through proper channels before. The executive access code is embedded in the notification header, Damon said. Your IT department can confirm it in under 60 seconds. A pause. Would you like to make that call, or should I? Derek stopped. He did not know how to verify an embedded code. He knew that. And from the way Damon said it, Damon knew he didn't know, which made the next 5 seconds the most expensive silence in Derek Cole's career. Thomas Garfield watched from near the seating area. He had drifted closer without deciding to. Close enough to see the muscle in Derek's jaw working. Close enough to see the exact moment Derek ran out of road. Thomas had spent 30 years in financial consulting. He had sat across tables from men who were wrong and didn't know it yet. He knew this shape. He recognized it the way you recognize weather before it arrives. He looked at Raymond Ellison. Raymond was still standing the way he had been standing for the last 35 minutes. Not rigid, not loose. The stillness of a man who has decided that stillness is the most powerful thing available to him right now. But something had shifted in his shoulders. Just slightly. The way a man's shoulders shift when he is no longer holding something back quite so hard. Thomas wanted to say something. He just wasn't sure he had earned the right yet. Damon was thinking about a morning in the fall of 2015. He was 17. He had won a STEM scholarship to a leadership conference in Washington, D.C. His mother had taken the confirmation letter to the copy shop on DeKalb Avenue and made 2 extra copies because she said the originals should never leave the house. His father had pressed the white button-down shirt twice. Once for the wrinkle near the collar. Once because Raymond Ellison prepared for things, and preparing felt like a way of protecting his son from a distance of 6 inches. First flight Damon had ever taken. He had memorized the whole process. Check-in, security, gate, board. He knew where to stand and when to move and what to have ready. He got through check-in without issue, got to the security line and moved through it the way he had practiced in his head. Laptop out, shoes off, steady, ready. The officer at the checkpoint held up one hand. Step over here. No explanation, no reason. Just the hand. Damon stepped over. They ran a wand over his jacket, checked his shoes, looked at his student ID for longer than the equipment required. 7 people went through the regular lane while he stood there. 8, 9. Raymond appeared at his elbow. Is there a problem? Just routine. Raymond said nothing after that, because Raymond understood something. Damon was only beginning to understand that the wrong word from either of them in that moment could cost his son more than a delayed flight, could follow him in ways that a scholarship didn't fix and a pressed shirt couldn't prevent. So they stood there, and it ended, and they walked to the gate without speaking. On the plane, Damon sat in the window seat and looked at the tarmac below, a baggage cart moving in the rain, his shirt pressed twice by his father's hands. He didn't ask why it had happened. He was 17 and he already knew why. What he didn't know yet was what to do with knowing. He held that question somewhere in the back of his chest, where things go when you're not ready to look at them. And he let the plane carry him south. That was the first time. The second time was different, not in what happened, in what he understood while it was happening. October 2019. He was 21. He had sold his first app 14 months earlier, a logistics tool built over 18 months of late nights in a dorm room, the kind of focused work that his roommates found alarming, and his professors found either impressive or diagnostic, depending on the week. The deposit confirmation came on a Thursday morning. He sat at his desk for 11 minutes without moving. Then he bought a business class ticket to San Francisco, not because he needed it. He needed the meeting, and he could get there in coach for a fraction of the cost. But he had thought about it carefully and decided he wanted to test something. About himself, about the world, about the distance between what things claimed to be and what they actually were when you put weight on them. He wore a collared shirt, dark pants, carried his laptop bag. He boarded first, found his seat, stowed his bag, sat down. The man in the seat beside him was around 50, blue suit, the ease of someone for whom this was not a test. He glanced at Damon once, registered him, looked forward. The flight attendant moved through the cabin on the first drink service. She asked the man in the blue suit, asked the woman across the aisle, stepped past Damon's row without stopping. He waited, told himself maybe she'd circle back. She came through again on the second service, asked the couple 2 rows up, asked the man behind him, stepped past again. Damon did not flag her down, did not press the call button. He had a dry mouth and 5 hours to go, and he sat with that fact and looked at the Atlantic 40,000 feet below and understood something he had only half understood at 17. At 17, he hadn't known what to do with knowing. Now he did. He got up once, walked to the galley. A different crew member back there said sorry about that while pouring his orange juice, which was interesting because she hadn't been the one who skipped him. He walked back to his seat, looked out the window, took out his phone. One day I'll be part of an airline that makes this impossible. Not a plan, not a pitch, Just a sentence, the kind that forms in the chest before it reaches the fingers. The kind that once written becomes something you are accountable to. He put the phone away. He didn't look out the window after that. He looked forward, 2021. He was 23. He bought a standard economy ticket on Apex Sky Airlines, JFK to Miami. An investor contact had mentioned the airline twice in 1 week, which was the kind of pattern Damon had learned to pay attention to. 4 years old, profitable in year 3, route network expanding, a CEO named Victor Aldridge, who had built it on something called passenger-first culture, a phrase that appeared in 3 separate profiles, and meant nothing by itself, but meant something about the distance between the claim and the reality, which was what Damon was actually interested in. He wore a gray hoodie, sat in 24B, middle seat. He wanted to be surrounded by the experience, no escape hatch. The crew worked through drinks. When they reached his row, the flight attendant asked the man by the window, asked the woman on the aisle, looked somewhere past Damon's left ear and moved on. He waited. She did not come back. He sat there for 90 minutes, not angry. Something past anger, something that had been refined by 2 previous experiences into something more precise. He was watching now, counting, measuring the gap between what this airline said it was and what it was doing 4 rows in front of him, and 3 rows behind him and nowhere in row 24. He did not get up, did not press the button. He just watched and recorded and held the feeling steady. When they landed, he called the investor contact from the arrivals hall. Tell me everything about Apex Sky's ownership structure. He signed paperwork in Miami the next morning. He flew home on Apex Sky Economy again. Same seat selection, same gray hoodie. Watched the crew the whole flight back. 3 months later, when the first quarterly report arrived, he called Karen Mills 3 weeks into working for him, and said what he needed was not what the reports said. He needed what was actually happening on these flights. That conversation was the beginning of today. Not the screen behind Patricia Walsh, not the badge going dark, not even the 17 plaint claim files. A window seat in row 24. A dry mouth. A sentence written in a notes app at 37,000 feet. All of it had been the beginning of today. Back at gate 34, Faye Odom pushed open the jet bridge door. She had been inside for 12 minutes. Pre-boarding prep. And listening. Because the door between the jet bridge and the gate area was thin enough that sound came through. And she had been listening with the attention of someone who recognized what she was hearing. She had run the tickets through secondary verification inside the gate. All 4. Green across the board. She had the printout. She stepped out and walked to the podium. I ran the Ellison tickets through secondary verification, she said. Not loud, just clear. All 4 are valid. No discrepancy, no irregularity. Derek turned. I know, Faye said. She looked at Paul Okafor. I wanted it on record. Paul wrote it down without being asked. Lorraine Ellison looked at Faye and said nothing. But the look she gave her was 22 years of teaching compressed into 3 seconds. The look of a woman who knows exactly what it costs to step into a space nobody invited you into, and knows exactly what it's worth. Later, after the gate had cleared and the plane was boarding, and there was a narrow window before the jet bridge door closed, Damon stopped beside Faye. You didn't have to do that. She was quiet for a moment. 8 years ago I was a passenger, she said. Different airline, different gate, same thing. A pause. I filed a complaint. Another pause. Never heard back. She looked at him directly. I became crew because I thought I could do something from the inside. I've been waiting 8 years for a moment where I could actually do something. She said it simply. No drama in it. Today was it. Damon looked at her record, he said. Not just the incident file. On record. She nodded once. Went back inside. Karen called back at 8:51 a.m. Damon answered. Did not step away. Did not lower his voice. Put it on speaker, because this happened in public. Damon. Karen's voice was the same as it always was when things were most serious. Completely level. The voice of someone describing weather. I pulled complaint number 9 in full. I need you to hear the name on file. Tell me. Clarence E. Ellison. 66 years old at time of filing. Brooklyn, New York. A pause. The kind of pause that allows information to settle before more arrives. Filed 14 months ago. Gate 34. He was traveling to Atlanta. Held at the gate for 40 minutes. Told there was a booking discrepancy. Bumped to a departure 4 hours later. Submitted the complaint 2 days after he got home. She stopped. Marked resolved in 48 hours. No investigation documentation often file. No follow-up contact made with the passenger. Raymond's hands came out of his pockets. Just that. Just his hands dropping to his sides. But Damon saw it and knew what it cost and what it meant and how long Raymond had been holding them in there. Lorraine made no sound. She brought one hand to her collarbone and held it there, still, like he was checking that something was intact. "Who was the gate agent on record?" Damon said. His voice had not changed by a single degree. "Patricia Walsh." The name went into the gate area quietly, the way a stone goes into still water. Small entry, wide rings. Patricia Walsh did not look up from the podium. Damon looked at her. He thought about the bulova on Clarence's wrist that morning in the car. The crack in the crystal nobody had ever fixed, because nobody wanted to touch it. His grandfather Elijah in 1961. Same airport, same building, different decade, same message, delivered through a different mouth. 3 generations, same stillness, same discipline, same cost of keeping it. He looked at Patricia Walsh and understood something he had not let himself fully understand until this moment. This was not about him, had never been about him. The 35 minutes at this gate were the most recent entry, in a file that went back further than he had been alive. And the only reason he was standing here with a code for Karen to activate was that, somewhere along that file, his grandfather had passed something down. Not money, not property. The specific knowledge of how to keep going when the road tells you that you don't belong on it. He looked at Karen's name on his phone screen. "Preserve all 17 complaints exactly as they are," he said, "and get Victor on the line. Tell him I need 2 minutes." Victor Aldridge called at 8:56 a.m., 58 years old, CEO of Apex Sky for 7 years. He had built the airline on a stated principle that he believed in the way most people believe in things they have not yet been required to examine under direct light. Damon put it on speaker, did not explain why. The gate area was quiet enough to hear every word through the phone. "Damon, I've reviewed the alert and the incident log from gate 34. I want to address this directly and on record." A pause. "Patricia Walsh and Derek Cole are suspended from all active duties effective immediately, pending full investigation. Their access credentials have been revoked as of this moment." Patricia looked down at her badge, the green light that had been on every morning for 6 years. Off, she stared at it for a long time. Long enough that the staring became its own kind of statement. Derek reached for his phone. The automatic reach of someone who needs a system to confirm what is happening to him. He opened the Apex Sky Crew app. One line. "Access temporarily suspended. Contact HR for details." He read it twice. Put the phone back in his pocket. Stood in the aisle with nowhere to go. Victor continued. "Paul Okafor, you have full authority to provide whatever the Ellison family requires. No restrictions." Another pause. Then directly, "Damon, I'm sorry. This should not have happened on our airline." Damon said, "It's happened before, Victor. 17 times. That's why I was here today." A longer pause. "I know," Victor said. "We'll talk." The call ended. Evelyn Brooks lowered her phone slightly. Not to stop recording, just to breathe. The viewer count had moved past 60,000 while Victor was speaking. She could feel the weight of what was accumulating in the comments without looking at them. She had done this long enough to know the difference between a clip that people watch and a clip that people carry with them. This was the second kind. Thomas Garfield looked at Raymond Ellison. Raymond was looking at his son. The expression on his face was not something Thomas had a word for. Not quite pride, though pride was layered into it. Something older. The look of a man who gave his son something, not knowing if it was enough, and is only now finding out. Thomas made a decision he had been building toward for 35 minutes. He walked to Raymond, stopped 2 feet away, close enough to be intentional. "I've been sitting over there since before your family arrived at this gate," he said. "I saw every document check. I watched them go through your son's bag. I watched your family stand in this lane while everyone else on this flight walked past you." He looked Raymond directly in the eye, not around him. At him. "I kept telling myself someone else would say something, that it wasn't my place to get involved." He stopped. "I was wrong. I should have come over 20 minutes ago. I'm sorry I waited." Raymond looked at Thomas Garfield. The same careful attention he gave everything that mattered. Measuring. Not coldly, just honestly. Taking the man at his word without yet deciding what the word was worth. "You came," Raymond said. 2 words. But the way he said them, not warm, not cold, just settled, told Thomas Garfield more about what Raymond Ellison was made of than anything else that morning. Thomas nodded, and stayed exactly where he was. Derek Cole was not built for stillness and never had been. He was built for forward, for the next thing, the next move, the next position to take. 17 years in airline operations, moving through boarding lanes and jet bridges and terminals, and he had never once in that time been required to stand still in a space that was closing around him. So he did what he always did when the ground moved. He pushed. You planned this. Low voice, controlled anger, trying to sound like certainty. You came in dressed like that, bought the economy ticket, left your profile unflagged. The whole thing was a setup. Damon looked at him, not with contempt, with the calm of someone who is not afraid of what is in front of them. You're telling me, Damon said slowly, that I flew economy in a gray hoodie as the owner of this airline, to catch my own employees. That's exactly. I flew economy in this hoodie because it's what I wore today. He said it the way you say something that should not need saying. I own 34% of this airline in this hoodie or in a suit, when you know I own it or when you don't, when I'm standing here or when I'm not. A pause, short, clean. My identity does not change based on what you decide you're looking at. That's the part you still don't understand. Derek had nothing for that. He stood with his arms at his sides, and the expression of a man who has followed his own argument all the way to its end and found nothing waiting there. Paul Okafor said quietly, but finally, Derek. Patricia, away from the podium now. This time they moved. Carla Sutton had been 6 feet behind Derek for the entire morning. 6 feet, close enough to hear everything, far enough to maintain the story she was telling herself, which was that this was not her call, that someone else would handle it, that these things had a way of resolving themselves without her involvement. She had told herself this story before. 14 months ago, at this same gate, she had stood in a similar position when a 66-year-old man named Clarence Ellison arrived with a valid ticket and left 4 hours later on a different flight. She had watched Patricia process the complaint 2 days afterward, watched her mark it resolved with no investigation, no documentation, no phone call to the man who had filed it, and Patricia had handed the form to Carla and asked her to countersign, and Carla had done it in about 30 seconds, and told herself it was procedure and moved through the rest of that day, without thinking about it again. She had not thought about Clarence Ellison in 14 months. She was thinking about him now. She looked at Raymond Ellison standing with his hands at his sides after they came out of his pockets. She thought about how Clarence had stood. The same way. The same deliberate containment. The learned stillness of a man who has calculated, many times and always correctly, that the cost of not containing it is higher than anyone else in the room will ever have to pay. She thought about what it costs to learn that, and how long it takes, and what it takes away in the learning. She thought about the fact that it should not have to be learned at all. Carla Sutton stepped out of her position. Not dramatically, she didn't announce it, didn't make a speech, just moved sideways, away from the space directly behind Derek, away from where she had been standing for 35 minutes. She didn't cross to the Ellison family. She didn't go anywhere specific. She just stopped being behind Derek, which, in the architecture of that moment, was its own complete sentence. Evelyn Brooks caught it, the small sideways step. She would write about it later, not about the blue screen or the badge going dark or Victor Aldridge's voice through a phone speaker. About that step, about the fact that in a room where everyone had chosen a position, moving sideways was a choice too. Maybe the hardest one available to Carla Sutton that morning, because it had no audience and no reward and no dramatic clarity. It was just a woman deciding she was no longer going to stand behind a thing she knew was wrong. Evelyn would call it the smallest act of courage she had filmed in 5 years of travel writing, which was probably the most honest sentence she had ever written. The gate area had reorganized itself without anyone declaring it. Patricia Walsh behind the podium with a deactivated badge. Derek Cole in the aisle with his phone in his pocket showing him a message he could not fix. Carla Sutton sideways. Paul Okafor writing things down. Faye Odom near the jet bridge door. Not drawing attention, just present in the way that people are present when they have done the right thing and don't need anyone to remark on it. Damon told Paul he did not want to go to a back room. This happened out here, he said. It gets resolved out here. Paul looked at him for a moment, thought about protocol. Thought about the 60,000 plus people currently watching through Evelyn Brooks's phone. Thought about the incident report he was going to have to file before noon. Then he nodded. Damon turned to face the gate area. He did not clear his throat, did not wait for quiet, because the gate area was already quiet. He began speaking in a voice that was even and unhurried and carried without effort because it was not trying to carry. My name is Damon Ellison. I'm 26 years old. I'm here today flying with my father and my mother. We have valid tickets for this flight. We bought them 2 weeks ago directly through the Apex Sky website. He stopped. Let it breathe. I'm also the largest individual shareholder of Apex Sky Airlines. I own 34% of this company. The gate area processed this, not all at once, in a wave, the way recognition moves through a room. When something rearranges what people thought they were looking at. A woman in the second row said, "Oh my God," at a volume she did not intend. A man near the window let out a short, flat sound. 2 people put their phones down, then picked them back up. Damon looked at Patricia Walsh. You held my family in this boarding lane for 35 minutes. Our documents were checked 4 times. My bag was searched after it had already been cleared by TSA. You announced over the intercom that we were a security concern, in front of everyone in this terminal, without any basis. He spoke as if he were reading from a record, which in a sense he was, because he had been building the record since 8:09 this morning. And when the station manager confirmed our tickets were valid, your colleague told me I had set this up, that I came here to catch people doing something wrong. He paused. I came here because 17 passengers filed complaints at this gate in 14 months. I came here because every single one of those complaints was marked resolved with no documentation and no follow-up. I came here because one of those passengers was my uncle, Clarence Ellison. He flew out of this gate 14 months ago on a valid ticket and was sent to a flight 4 hours later. He missed the beginning of a funeral service for one of his oldest friends. Damon's voice did not change, not in volume, not in pace. He filed a complaint when he got home. He never heard back. The gate area was quiet enough to hear the corridor outside. I want that understood, Damon said. Not just the 35 minutes this morning. The 14 months before it. The 17 complaints no one answered. The 66-year-old man who sat in an airport for 4 extra hours and never received a single phone call. He looked out at the people in the seats, at Thomas Garfield, at Evelyn Brooks, at the woman in the 3rd row with a tissue she had not needed until now. That is what I want people to understand, Patricia Walsh said quietly. With what was left of her professional composure, I was following procedure. I had no way of knowing who you were. If your account had been flagged as executive level, this would have been handled completely differently. Damon looked at her, held the silence for 5 seconds. You're right, he said. You didn't know who I was, and that is the entire point. He kept his eyes on her, not with anger, with something clearer than anger. Something that had been refined by 3 flights and 17 complaint files and a 68-year-old man in a parked car this morning, wearing a cracked gold watch that belonged to a man who had stood outside this same terminal in 1961 and been told the position was filled. Everything you did this morning, every delay, every fabricated check, every assumption made, before a single word was spoken, you would have done it to anyone who walked up to this podium, looking the way my family looks. It would have happened to a man going to see his grandchildren, to a woman flying to a job interview, to my uncle going to say goodbye to his friend. He did not raise his voice. The problem isn't that you didn't recognize me. The problem is what you chose to see before any of us opened our mouths. Patricia Walsh opened her mouth and closed it, because there was nothing in the space where an answer was supposed to go. Not a procedure, not a protocol, not a training manual, nothing. Thomas Garfield stepped forward, no invitation, no opening. He just moved into the space because he had decided that the space required him, and he had already waited too long once this morning. He stopped in front of Raymond Ellison. I sat in that seat for 35 minutes, he said, and then said something that had not been planned, that arrived whole and cost him something. I've been asking myself ever since I stood up why it took me that long. I keep running the same loop, and I keep landing in the same place. I told myself it wasn't my place to get involved, and I knew that wasn't true, and I kept telling myself anyway. He stopped, met Raymond's eyes. I'm sorry it took me 34 minutes. I'm going to be thinking about those 34 minutes for a long time. Raymond Ellison looked at Thomas Garfield with the full attention of a man who spent his life deciding what things were worth. Then he said, "You came. Not warm, not cold, just true." And Thomas Garfield, who had received many things over 30 years of professional life, had never received 2 words that landed quite like those. He stepped back. He did not return to seat H3. Evelyn Brooks kept recording. Her coffee was completely cold. She did not touch it. She had one job right now and she understood it, and she was going to do it all the way to the end. Because some mornings, the story walks up to you in a gray hoodie with a canvas bag over one shoulder. And the only thing required of you is to be paying attention when it does. The plane was still at the gate. 40 minutes behind schedule. The pilot had not made an announcement about why. The crew inside the cabin was doing what crews do when something has happened that nobody is ready to explain yet. They moved through the pre-departure routine with the focused quiet of people who understood that the flight they were about to work would be talked about for a long time. At gate 34, the boarding lane was finally moving again. Not because everything was resolved, because some things cannot be resolved in a single morning, and everyone in that terminal knew it. What could be done had been done. Patricia Walsh was gone from the podium. Derek Cole was gone from the aisle. Paul Okafor was standing at the gate door with his notepad and his phone, and the particular expression of a man who has already started writing the report in his head and knows it is going to be a long one. Faye Odom held the jet bridge door open. The remaining passengers filed through. Some of them looked at Damon as they passed, not all the same way, some with recognition, some with something softer. One older woman in a yellow cardigan slowed down and said nothing, but put her hand briefly on Lorraine Ellison's arm as she passed. Lorraine looked at her. The woman nodded once and kept walking. That was all. But it was something. Thomas Garfield passed last. He stopped in front of Raymond. "Have a good flight," he said. Raymond looked at him, really looked. The same careful attention he had given him twice already that morning. Then thank you. 2 words, same as before, but different weight this time. Less measuring, more settled. Thomas nodded and walked through the door. Then it was just the Ellison family. Damon looked at his parents. Raymond, who had stood with his hands in his pockets for 35 minutes and his whole life before that. Lorraine, who had said what needed to be said in a voice that did not waver once. Damon picked up his canvas bag. He walked through the gate door first, and his parents followed him onto the plane. C-24A, 24B, 24C. Economy, middle section. Same as Damon had booked 2 weeks ago, when this was still just a plan, just a set of complaint files on a screen, just a problem that needed to be looked at directly instead of through reports. Raymond took the window. Lorraine took the aisle. Damon sat between them. Nobody said anything while the last few passengers boarded, and the overhead bins filled, and the crew ran through safety checks, and the jet bridge door sealed with that particular sound. That means you are committed now. You are in the air, whether you plan to be or not. The seatbelt sign came on. The engines changed pitch. Outside the window, the terminal building slid slowly backward. Damon watched it go. He thought about the screen above the podium, glowing blue with his name on it. 34%. Board member. The words that had changed the temperature of an entire gate area in under 30 seconds. He thought about how none of it should have been necessary. That was the part that sat with him. Not the confrontation. Not Derek's face when the badge went dark. Not Patricia Walsh standing there with nothing to say. Those things had their own weight. But the weight underneath them was heavier. The whole morning should not have been necessary. 17 people had filed complaints before him. 17 people who did not have a code for Karen to activate. Who did not have 34% of anything. Who just had what everyone is supposed to have when they walk into an airport with a valid ticket. The right to be there. The right to be treated like they were supposed to be there. And none of it had been enough. He looked at his father's profile against the window, the gray at Raymond's temples, the jaw that had been set the same way for 35 minutes, the hands that had finally come out of his pockets when Karen said Clarence's name. Damon said, "Dad." Raymond turned from the window. "I didn't do this for the drama." Damon said it quietly, just between the two of them under the engine noise. "I want you to know that. I didn't do it to make a point or to catch anyone out or to put my name on a screen." Raymond looked at him. "I did it because Uncle Clarence sat in an Atlanta airport for 4 hours and never got a phone call back. I did it because the next person who walks up to that gate deserves better than what we got this morning." He paused. "And because I had the tools to do something about it. And that felt like an obligation, not a choice." Raymond was quiet for a moment. The plane had turned onto the taxiway. The terminal was gone from the window now. Just runway and gray sky and the flat industrial expanse of Queens moving past. You know your grandfather came to that airport, Raymond said finally. Before you were born. Before I was much older than you are now. 1961. He had his electrical license. He had his resume. He had his good shoes on. He looked out the window. They told him the position was filled. He rode the subway back to Brooklyn and he never talked about it. Not once. A pause. But sometimes when something reminded him of it, he'd go quiet in a way that filled the whole room. Damon said nothing. He knew this silence. He had grown up inside it. He drove a cab for 30 years, Raymond said. And I asked him once, when I was about 16, if he was angry about what happened. About the airport, about the job, about all of it. Raymond's voice was even. Not performing evenness, just even. The way a road is level because the ground underneath it has been that way a long time. He looked at me and he said, "Son, I can't change the road, but I can get every person who sits in my cab somewhere safe. That's mine. Nobody can take that." The plane stopped at the end of the runway, waiting for clearance. He didn't have what you have, Raymond said. He was still looking out the window, but he had the same thing inside. He turned and looked at his son, same heart, just different tools. Damon looked at his father. He had been in a lot of rooms in the last 3 years, conference rooms, board meetings, investor calls, rooms full of people who wanted to understand how a 26-year-old owned 34% of a regional airline and what he planned to do with it. He had answered those questions carefully and strategically, and with a particular kind of patience that people sometimes mistook for youth. None of those rooms had required what this morning required, and none of them had given him what his father's voice just gave him. Sitting in seat 24B, engine noise and runway lights and the gray sky over Queens, he put his hand on his father's arm. Raymond put his hand over Damon's, that was all, no more words. The engines rose in pitch. The plane began to move. At 37,000 feet, somewhere over the Carolinas, Damon called his uncle. He got up from his seat, moved to the back of the cabin near the galley, stood with his phone at his ear while the crew moved around him with the easy awareness of people who share small spaces professionally. Clarence picked up on the third ring. "You land already?" "Still in the air, I wanted to call." "A beat? You all right?" "Yes." Damon looked at the galley wall, a safety instruction card, a fire extinguisher in a red bracket. "Ordinary things, I need to tell you something," he told him. "All of it, the complaint files, the 14 months, Gate 34, Patricia Walsh." The 40 minutes Clarence had spent waiting while his friend Harold Simmons's funeral service started without him 4 hours away in Atlanta. Clarence listened without interrupting. Damon said, "The complaint you filed. It was number 9 out of 17. It was marked resolved in 48 hours. Nobody ever investigated it. Nobody ever called you back." Silence on the line. Not surprised silence. Not angry silence. Something older than both of those. The silence of a man who had known, on some level, exactly what had happened to his complaint and had filed it anyway, because his mother told him you say it even when nobody's listening. 14 months, Clarence said finally. His voice was quiet, steady. "That's a long time, it is. How many of the 17 did you reopen?" "All of them," Damon said. A longer pause. Damon could hear street noise on Clarence's end. The particular sound of Brooklyn in the middle of a weekday morning. A truck, a horn, a radio from somewhere. "Boy." Clarence said it softly. Just that word, like a sentence that started and decided it was already complete. "Your grandmother always said say it even when nobody's listening. Somebody might be." "Somebody was," Damon said, the whole time. Another silence. Shorter this time. "I wore your grandfather's watch today," Clarence said. "On purpose. Figured he ought to be there somehow." Damon closed his eyes for 1 second. The crack in the crystal, the gold tone. Elijah Ellison, 1961. Same airport, same message. He was, Damon said. He was there. Clarence made a sound that was not quite a laugh, not quite anything else. Just a sound from somewhere deep in the chest where things go when they finally get to come out. "You need anything else from me?" "No, I just needed you to know." "I know," Clarence said. "Thank you, son." Damon stood in the galley for a minute after the call ended, just standing, letting the altitude and the engine noise hold him up for a minute, while he put the weight back in the right places. Then he went back to his seat, in a small conference room off the main corridor of Terminal 4, at approximately 10:15 in the morning. Patricia Walsh sat across a table from 2 members of Apex Sky's HR department. Between them was a laptop. On the screen, the activity log from Gate 34's terminal, time-stamped, every action, every input, every tap of a screen going back 6 hours. The HR representative was a woman named Diane, 42, with reading glasses, and the practiced neutral expression of someone trained to observe and record and not conclude out loud. At 8:47 a.m., Diane said, "Your account applied a manual review flag to ticket W4471. There was no automated trigger from the system that prompted that action." She looked up over her glasses. "Can you explain why you did that?" Patricia sat very still. She had been sitting very still since she walked into this room, since the badge went dark, since Victor Aldridge's voice came through a phone speaker in a gate area and said her name in that particular tone. She had been preparing something to say. She had been building it in her head during the walk from the gate to this room. Something about protocol, something about behavioral indicators, something about the judgment calls that experienced gate agents are trained to make in the moment. She opened her mouth, and the sentence stopped itself, because she could hear how it was going to land. Against a time-stamped log, against 4 green ticket scans, against Carla Sutton, who had already volunteered to give her own account before anyone asked, against Faye Odom's printed verification, against a screen full of blue letters that said 34%. The sentence stopped itself because it was not going to be enough, and somewhere underneath the professional composure she had been maintaining for 6 years, Patricia Walsh knew that, had maybe known it since the moment she looked at Damon Ellison's boarding pass, and looked at him, and looked back at the pass, and made a decision she could not explain. Not even to herself, especially not to herself. "I don't know," she said. Diane waited. "I looked at them," Patricia said, "and I did it. I applied the flag. I don't have a better answer than that. I looked at them and I did it, and I don't know why." The room was very quiet. Diane wrote something down, did not read it back, did not offer a response. Patricia looked at the table, at the laptop screen with its time-stamped log, at her own hands folded in her lap. She had been a gate agent for 11 years. She had processed thousands of passengers. She followed procedures. She was good at her job. She genuinely believed that about herself. She had never once thought of herself as someone who did the thing she had done this morning. And yet, the log was right there. 8:47 a.m. manual flag. No automated trigger. She had done it before she had a reason, before she had a thought. She had looked at a family, and her hands had done something that her brain had not consciously authorized, and the fact that she could not explain it was not a defense. It was the whole problem. It was more of the problem than a deliberate choice would have been, in some ways, because a deliberate choice could be examined and corrected and disciplined out of someone. This was something else. This lived somewhere below the level of decisions, below the level of intentions. She did not say any of this to Diane. She sat in the quiet room and held it. Outside in the corridor, Derek Cole was waiting on a bench. He had called a lawyer. The lawyer had given him 3 instructions. The lawyer was not aware that 3 simultaneous instructions were not something Derek Cole was structurally capable of following. Carla Sutton was not in the corridor. She had walked into the HR office 20 minutes earlier, before anyone came to find her, and said, "I need to tell you about complaint number 9, and what I signed." 62,000 feet below the clouds, the plane touched down in Miami at 11:47 a.m. 22 minutes late. Nobody complained about the delay. The Ellisons took a cab from the airport to the hotel. Lorraine had a window seat in the cab and watched the city go by, with the particular attention of someone who has been inside something heavy all morning and is only now beginning to put it down. Palm trees, bright storefronts, a man on a bicycle wearing a hat that was too large for him. Ordinary things. The hotel was on the water. Lorraine walked through the lobby and straight out the back to the terrace, where the pool gave way to a stretch of sand and the ocean beyond it. She sat in one of the chairs by the water, put her sunglasses on, opened her book, did not read a single word for about 15 minutes. Raymond went upstairs. He lay down on the bed in the hotel room without changing clothes, looked at the ceiling, thought about his father, thought about the cab Clarence had driven for 30 years, thought about the good shoes Elijah had worn to an airport in 1961 and what it had cost him to put them back on the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning after that for 30 years. He thought about what it means to pass something down. Not the wound, not the silence, but the steadiness underneath. The decision to keep going, to get every person in the cab somewhere safe. He thought his son had figured out a way to make that mean something bigger than a cab. He thought his father would have found that funny and beautiful in equal measure. He fell asleep without meaning to, and slept for an hour, which was the first real sleep he had gotten since 3 in the morning when he woke up thinking about the trip. Damon sat on the hotel terrace, laptop open, phone face up. He wrote the email to Victor Aldridge in 20 minutes, not because it was easy to write, because he had been composing it in pieces since the plane lifted off the runway and it was ready. Victor, this is my formal incident report from Gate 34, Terminal 4, JFK, filed this morning. Full documentation will come from Karen by end of day. The immediate summary: Patricia Walsh initiated the situation with no actionable system trigger. Derek Cole escalated it deliberately and made a public intercom announcement designed to identify my family as a security concern without any basis. Carla Sutton participated through inaction and has self-reported to HR. Faye Odom independently verified our tickets and stood with my family at direct professional risk. I want that formally noted. This was not an isolated incident. We have 17 complaints from this terminal in 14 months. I want every single one reopened. I want the investigation conducted by an external party. And I want a full audit of how complaints at this terminal have been processed, documented, and closed. The pattern is what created this morning. This morning is the evidence. What we do next is the only part that matters now. He read it once, sent it. He closed the laptop. He looked at the ocean. The water was the color of something he didn't have a name for. Green-blue shifting. A pelican landed on a post 20 feet from where he was sitting, and sat there with the complete satisfaction of a creature that had no unfinished business. Damon thought about Clarence's watch. The crack in the crystal. The gold tone worn soft by 30 years of wrists. His grandfather Elijah putting it on in 1961 to go to an airport where a woman at a desk would not look at his face. He thought about his father pressing a white shirt twice on the morning of his first flight. He thought about sitting at 37,000 feet with a dry throat for 90 minutes and writing one sentence into a notes app on his phone. One day I'll be part of an airline that makes this impossible. He had been 21 years old. He was 26 now, and he had built something. But sitting on this terrace, listening to the ocean, he understood something he had not fully understood before this morning. He had built something real. Something that had 34% and a board seat and an executive code that could light up a terminal screen in 60 seconds. All of that was real, and it was not enough. Not because it hadn't worked this morning. It had. The badge went dark. The call came through. The complaints were being reopened. But there were 17 people before him who didn't have a code, who had sat in airports and filed complaints and heard nothing back and gone home and put it somewhere in the back of their chests, where things go when you're not ready to look at them yet. 17 people who had done everything right and gotten nowhere. He had built something. He had a lot more to build. 6 weeks after Gate 34, Apex Sky Airlines published a notice on its corporate website. No press conference. No social media campaign. No announcement email with a gradient banner and a quote from the CEO. Just a notice. Plain text. Factual. 34 complaints previously marked as resolved without documentation had been reopened and individually reviewed. Every passenger who had filed one would receive direct personal contact within 30 days. Not a form email, a phone call. From a named employee with a direct number to call back. A third-party firm had been engaged to conduct a full audit of complaint intake and resolution processes at all Apex Sky terminals. No Apex Sky HR involvement in the investigation itself. Mandatory crew training, developed and administered by an organization outside the company, would roll out across all terminals over the following 90 days. A new anonymous reporting channel for crew members was live as of that day, managed entirely outside the internal HR structure. No supervisor access. The notice did not mention Damon Ellison. It did not reference a clip or a gate or a morning that 62,000 people had watched in real time and approximately 3 million had seen in the following 48 hours. It simply listed things the company was going to do. Faye Odom was named as a member of the newly formed Crew Development Advisory Panel. 5 frontline employees selected to review training materials and provide direct input on crew culture. Her first recommendation was approved without revision. The mandatory training would open with a single exercise. A boarding gate interaction 90 seconds long. Shown first from the crew perspective, then shown again from the passenger's perspective. Same interaction. same words. Two completely different experiences of the same 90 seconds. The question at the end of the exercise was not multiple choice. It had no correct answer printed at the bottom. It was just a question: which version did you watch? And which version have you been in? Carla Sutton served a 90-day suspension. On the 63rd day, she wrote an email. She addressed it to Damon Ellison. She found the address through the official Apex Skyboard contact page, which meant it went to Karen Mills first. Which meant Karen read it and sat with it for a few minutes before forwarding it. Mr. Ellison, I don't expect a response. I'm not writing because I think I've earned one. I'm writing because I need to say something that belongs somewhere real. I knew the tickets were valid. I knew it the morning you and your family came to gate 34. I had seen the screen. I knew there was no flag. I stayed where I was. I didn't speak. I watched the whole thing happen and I told myself it wasn't my call. And I kept telling myself that right up until the moment I stepped sideways, and even then I didn't say anything. I just moved. I also need to tell you that 14 months ago, when your uncle filed his complaint, I signed the paperwork marking it resolved. Patricia asked me to. I did it in about 30 seconds. I didn't investigate anything. I didn't ask any questions. I just signed. I'm not writing to ask for my job back. I don't think I've earned that yet. I'm writing because I don't want the last official thing I did in that uniform to be the thing I did at gate 34. And because your uncle sat in an Atlanta airport for 4 hours on his way to say goodbye to his friend, and nobody ever called him. I'm sorry I was part of that. Karen forwarded it with one line: thought you should see this. Damon read it twice, then wrote back. He wrote, thank you for sending this. If your review in 6 months reflects the change you're describing, I'll support reinstatement. Accountability is supposed to open a door, not just close one. He sent it. Then he closed the email and sat with what it meant for a minute. Because he was 26 years old, and he owned 34% of an airline, and this morning he had told a woman that accountability opens doors, and he had meant it, and he wanted to keep meaning it when it was inconvenient to mean it. Which was most of the time. Which was the whole point. Thomas Garfield sent a letter, handwritten, on good stationery, addressed to the Apex Sky Airlines corporate office in Dallas, care of the Office of the Chief Executive Officer. He did not know if it would reach anyone. He sent it anyway. I don't know if this letter gets to anyone who matters. I'm sending it because I think it belongs somewhere that isn't just my head. I sat at gate 34 for 35 minutes watching something wrong happen. I watched a family get treated as a problem for no reason I could identify. I watched their documents checked 4 times. I watched their son's bag searched after it had already been cleared. I watched a gate agent make a public announcement that pointed at them in front of hundreds of people. And I sat in my seat and told myself it wasn't my business. I've been asking myself since then how many other rooms I've stayed quiet in. How many times in my life I looked at something happening to someone else and decided it wasn't my place. I don't have a count. I've tried to think of one and I can't get to the bottom of the list. I don't know if Damon Ellison or his family will ever see this, but on that plane flying to Miami I made myself a promise. The next time I'm in a room where something wrong is happening, I'm going to stand up sooner. Not perfect, not immediately, but sooner. I'm going to try. Karen Mills received the letter on a Thursday. She read it, put it in a manila envelope, wrote Damon's name on the front, and set it on his desk. He read it that afternoon, folded it back along its original creases, put it in the top drawer of his desk, which was where he kept things he wanted to be able to find again. Evelyn Brooks published a piece 10 days after Gate 34. Not about Damon Ellison, not about Apex Sky, not about the clip, not about the 62,000 viewers or the 3 million who watched the replay or the comment sections that ran 17 pages deep, about Thomas Garfield, about the 34 minutes. She wrote, we talk about the people who cause harm. We talk about the bystanders who watch and do nothing. What we talk about less is the third group, the ones who almost didn't act, who sat there for 34 minutes convincing themselves it wasn't their place, and then at the last possible moment stood up. Thomas Garfield is the third group. So probably are most of us. Courage doesn't always arrive on time. It just has to arrive. The piece got shared more than the clip, not immediately, slowly. Person by person, the way things move when they've landed somewhere true. 3 months after Gate 34, the Ellison family flew again. Miami to New York, return trip, rested. Raymond had gotten a full day of sleep in a hotel room. Lorraine had finished her book and started another one. Damon had spent 3 days in meetings that he would have rather been in 3 months ago, before Gate 34 made them necessary. But they were done now. And the flight home felt different from the flight out, in a way he was not going to try to put into words just yet. At the gate, a young agent looked up when they arrived. She was maybe 24. Brown uniform, Apex sky badge, her hair in a bun. She looked up from her screen when the Ellisons approached and she smiled. Not the assembled smile, not the professional courtesy smile, the real one. The one that uses more of your face than you intend. Good morning, may I have your boarding passes? Raymond handed them over. 1 green light, 2 green light, 3 green light. You're all set, she said, handing them back. Have a wonderful flight. No pause, no sidestep, no screech, no second look. Just 4 green lights and a real smile, and the door to the jet bridge opening ahead of them. Lorraine looked at Raymond. Raymond looked forward. Damon walked through the door first, the same as he had 3 months ago, and his parents followed behind. Nobody looked back. Clarence Ellison was driving a fare from Prospect Park to downtown Brooklyn when Damon called. Tuesday, late morning. The BQ was moving, which was rare enough to feel like a gift. Clarence had the radio on low. Something from the 40s. One of those stations that plays the same 40 songs on rotation. And he knows every word of all of them because his mother used to play them on Sunday mornings. He answered through the car speaker. You land all right? Just boarded, Damon said. I wanted to call before we took off. Everything good? Everything's good. A pause. I just wanted you to know. The airline sent notices to all 34 reopened complaints this week. Personal calls, direct numbers to reach someone back. I wanted you to know that yours was one of them. Someone's going to call you. Clarence was quiet for a moment. About Harold's funeral, he said. About the 4 hours, yes. Another quiet. 14 months, Clarence said. Not angry, not bitter. Just noting it the way you note something that deserves to be noted. That's a long time for something to sit before somebody picks it up. It is, Damon said. I'm sorry it took that long. You didn't make it take that long. No, but I could have moved faster. Clarence considered this. He turned off the BQE at Atlantic Avenue. The fare in the back seat was looking at his phone and not listening, which was fine. Your grandfather, Clarence said. You know what he used to say when things took longer than they should have? Tell me. He'd say, Clarence, the road doesn't care how long you've been walking it. It just cares that you're still walking. A small sound. Man was philosophical at inconvenient times. Damon laughed, a real laugh. Short, surprised out of him, the kind that arrives before you know it's coming. Clarence heard it and smiled at the windshield. You did right, Clarence said. You hear me? You did right. I'm trying to. That's all it is. He turned onto Fulton Street. That's all it ever is. The fare in the back seat asked if they were close. Clarence told him 4 minutes. The radio played something with a trumpet in it that Clarence knew word for word. After a moment, Damon said, I'm going to go, Uncle Clarence. We're boarding. Go, Clarence said. Safe flight. Thank you for wearing the watch this morning. A pause. Tell your father I said hello, Clarence said quietly. And Damon, yeah, your grandfather would have liked to know. His voice dropped lower. Just for the two of them. Just for the space between a phone and a speaker on Fulton Street in Brooklyn on an ordinary Tuesday. That somebody finally said it, out loud, where everyone could hear. The light at the intersection turned green. Clarence Ellison pressed the gas and drove on. The watch on his wrist caught the morning light as his hand moved on the wheel. Gold tone, crack in the crystal, older than anyone he knew, still keeping time.